So we are being asked to determine the 6 trig functions of angle theta when it has this particular coordinate point. If we have a coordinate point, that means that we are going to be looking at a coordinate plane. So here is my xy axis coordinate plane. And I need to find the coordinate point -4, 3. -4, 3 would have been over -4 and up 3. So this coordinate point is about the coordinate point -4, 3. And this is supposed to lie on a circle if we are going to be doing trig functions with it. So here is my circle. And to find this trig functions, you had to have a right triangle related to this coordinate point. So we always start right here at the origin, and how we got to that coordinate point tells us our triangle. So I had to go over -4. So this distance was a distance of traveled -4. And then I had to go up 3. And that right there formed my 90-degree angle. So I have two sides to my right triangle. Now I need to make my hypotenuse because it's always directly across from the 90-degree angle. So now I have my hypotenuse. If we're going to do 6 trig functions, that means that I needed all of the sides of the right triangle. So since I have 2 sides and I need a third, we're going to use Pythagorean Theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared, where a is 3 and b is a -4. It's supposed to equal c squared. So go ahead and solve for c. So I just found 5 to be c. So my hypotenuse is in length of 5. So now that I have all 3 sides, we need to come up with the 6 trig functions. So I have sine of theta, I have cosine of theta, and I have tangent of theta. And I know if I have sine, the reciprocal of sine is cosecant. I know the reciprocal of cosine is secant. And I know the reciprocal of tangent is cotangent. But now how do I actually find these fractions? We have one new property that you need to learn. So we have on a circle, a coordinate point, we are given 2 sides, and the third side, the hypotenuse, is given to us as r. We know this is length x, this is length y, and we now know these 6 fractions using this right triangle, where y is the distance on the y, r is going to be the hypotenuse, the radius of the circle, and x is going to be the distance on the x. So we need to know these 6 trig functions. And remember, the denominators are never allowed to be 0. So we're going to use these 6 trig functions. Sine is supposed to be the distance on the y divided by the radius. If that's sine, the main cosecant is going to be the radius all over the distance on the y. So what is my y? Well, looking at my triangle, let's identify x, y, and r. X is the distance on the x-axis, -4. Y is the distance on the y-axis, 3. And r, you found it to be the radius of 5. So sine is y, which was 3, all over r, which was 5. If this is sine, then I know the reciprocal of it is 5 over 3, and it gives me cosecant. Now I need to find cosine. Cosine, according to our chart, is x divided by r, where x is -4 divided by r, which is 5. Now a negative divided by a positive is a negative. 4 divided by 5 is the fraction 4/5. So I have the fraction -4/5. If he is cosine, secant is -5 over 4, because they are reciprocal of each other. Tangent was the fraction y all over x, where I know my y is 3, and my x is a -4. Positive divided by negative is a negative. 3 divided by 4 is just the fraction 3/4. If this is tangent, cotangent is -4 over 3 because they are reciprocal of one another. So we just found our 6 trig functions. So we're being asked to determine the 6 trig functions of angle theta with the coordinate point. If it's a coordinate point, we know it's on an xy axis. And if we need the trig functions, we know it needs to be a right triangle within our circle on the xy axis. So finding our triangle, if I had to find the 8 of x, I had to go across the 8, positive 8 on the x, and then I was supposed to travel down to the 6 on the y. So here is my down 6 on the y, so it's a length of -6. This is my right angle, and then this would have been my hypotenuse because it's always opposite the right angle. The coordinate point, the way you read it is the way you draw it. You had to do the 8 first, there's my 8, and then from there you had to do -6, down 6. So you have to follow the coordinate point to find the correct triangle on our circle. So now that I have 2 sides, we got to do the Pythagorean Theorem to find our third side, where 8 is a, b is your -6, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to find c. So I just found c to be 10. So my hypotenuse is 10. So if I found all three sides correlate to either an x, a y, or an r. My distance on the x is 8. My distance on the y is -6, and you just found the hypotenuse to be 10. So now that I need to find sine, cosine, tangent, and once you find sine, the reciprocal of sine is cosecant, the reciprocal of cosine is secant, and the reciprocal of tangent is cotangent. So sine is supposed to be y divided by r. Y is a -6. R is a 10. Negative divided by positive is a negative. 6 divided by 10 is -3/5. So this is a fraction, -3/5. If this is sine, cosecant is going to be -5/3 because they're reciprocal of each other. Cosine. Cosine is going to be x divided by r, where I know my x is an 8. My r is a 10. 4 divided by 8 gives me the fraction 4/5. If this is cosine, secant is the fraction 5/4. Tangent. Tangent is y divided by x. Y is a -6. X is an 8. Negative divided by positive is a negative. 6 divided by 8 is going to give me my 3/4. So I have -3/4. If this is tangent, cotangent is negative. Reciprocal 3/4, I get 4/3. So here are my 6 trig functions. So we're being asked to find the 6 trig functions of angle theta with this coordinate point. So our coordinate point is on a circle on the xy axis. Where is our triangle? Well, we have to get to this coordinate point. So to get to that coordinate point, you had to go over 3. So there's my line, my side length 3. And then I had to go down -3 to get to my coordinate point. So that's a side length of -3. And that travel makes my right angle. And so my right angle is always immediately across from my hypotenuse. So here's my hypotenuse, which is r. So we have 2 of the 3 sides. I need to figure out my third side. So we need to use Pythagorean Theorem. So a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So my a is 3. My b is a -3. And I don't know c. So go ahead and solve for c. So solving for c, I need to take the square root of 18. If you don't remember how to do that, the square root of 18, if I were to prime factorize that, that's 2 times 3 times 3, because 3 times 3 is 9, 9 times 2 is 18. So that is 18. It's a square root, which meant there's a little hidden 2 out here, which says anytime you can make a pair of 2, they can escape. So this made a pair of 2, which meant that I had a factor of 3 escape. Nobody else made a pair of 2, so that meant that other numbers had to stay inside the square root sign. So the square root of 18 is 3√2. So that's a simplified version of side C, which for us is r. So we need to know x, y, and r. R is 3√2. The x travel was 3. The y travel was a -3. So we're going to use these 3 to find our sine, cosine, and tangent. And remember, once you find sine, you can find the cosecant, which is the reciprocal. Cosine is the reciprocal of secant. And tangent is the reciprocal of cotangent. So sine is supposed to be y divided by r. So my y is a -3. My r is a 3/2. 3 divided by 3 is 1. So I have a -1 all over √2. If you left sine like this and chose to then try to find the reciprocal, your reciprocal would be a -√2. I cannot leave sine like this though, because it has a radical in the denominator. You cannot leave a square root symbol in the denominator. So since it's the square root of 2 that we're not liking in the denominator, you need to multiply the numerator and denominator by a fraction of 1, which is the square root that you wanted to go away. So -1 times square root of 2 is a -√2. √2 times √2 is actually a 2. So sine is -√2/2. This does not have any denominator. So this was the reciprocal of the original fraction, and he is correct. He's fine. Cosine. Cosine is x divided by r. My x is a 3. My r is 3/√2. 3 divided by 3 is 1. So I've got 1 all over the square root of 2. If you left it like this and chose to take the reciprocal, your secant would be positive square root 2. And he has nothing that needs to be changed, so he is correct. This has to be simplified further because we're not allowed to have a square root symbol in the denominator. So if I want the square root of 2 to go away, you need to multiply both the top and the bottom by a square root of 2. 1 times the square root of 2 is the square root of 2. Square root of 2 times square root of 2 is square root of 4, which square root of 4 is 2. So this is the answer for cosine. If you were to reciprocal this, you would then have to rationalize again, and if you rationalized and simplified, you would have gotten this, which is why we did it before. Tangent. Tangent is y divided by x. My y is a negative 3. My x is a 3. Negative 3 divided by 3 is a negative 1. If you're to flip that fraction, you would still get a negative 1. So this is tangent, and this is cotangent.